today the topic is reality. It's not what you think, which I like as a play on words as well. We have, as we've talked about before, these conceptual frameworks based on our family history, our cultural history, our race history, or race influences of race and cultural norms. And we have these conceptual frameworks that help us to operate in the world, and we operate generally within those frameworks. And when we do, we're in known territory. And when we do that, what's happening is that we are norming to our perceptual, conceptual framework. And when we do that, it may or may, it's generally built on reason, conventional thinking, an understanding of the mundane reality, just the way things seem to be, and making assumptions from that. And when we do things and plan things or have projects when it turns out completely differently, we're befuddled. We think it's our fault. We think, we come up with all kinds of excuses or reasons why things didn't go the way we wanted. But the reality is that the reality in general is, generally speaking, not 100% a part of how we perceive things. An extreme example is there's, I guess, where y'all live too, there's people who are called flat earthers, people who really believe the earth is flat. And that's mundane thinking, right? Because you look out at the horizon, it's this, what appears to be a straight line. Therefore, the earth must be flat. And unfortunately, a lot of people think like that, even in very, very important situations. Like medically, for instance. Oh, you have a bug, we have to kill it with antibiotics. Well, yes, in many cases that will help, particularly if you have gangrene or something really severe. But then on the other hand, not necessarily. There are other ways of doing things. And antibiotics really have a drastic effect on the flora of the body. And some antibiotics pass the blood-brain barrier and affect the biome in the brain. That's why there's the most frequent side effects of antibiotics is anxiety and depression, because it's messing with how our brain functions also. Now sometimes, and that can be, that's fairly easily reversed when somebody stops the antibiotics. It's not a permanent thing, but that's the kind of thinking that gets us into trouble, because we get these unexpected results. Now, one of the things that we've talked about quite a bit is what we make up in our minds is sometimes we're not really aware of where that comes from or what our motivations are. Like, I want to get this particular job, let's say, because that'll mean X amount of money and there's a really prestigious position and so on and so forth. Well, that intention, that motivation is pretty much an egoic motivation. And egoic motivations tend to fail miserably because they're not really in sync with reality. Some people who, back in the 70s and 80s was the first inkling of how important organic farming is. So then the motivation was to get that message out as much as possible to help farms convert to organic planting and growing. And so there was this whole movement started, and some of you may know that the first attempts at at organic wheat bread were really pretty terrible. I mean, they really had to they had to go back and fix those recipes, and now it's really commonplace. But the reality underlying all that is the fact that we deplete the soil, we deplete the nutrients, become more and more dependent upon fertilizer and insecticides, which continues a negative loop and continues to destroy the ecology of the dirt, of the earth, and decreases the nutrition of food. So that's a sort of dynamic way of looking at it. If we look at, there's bugs, we have to administer an insecticide. Well, if you do that, then you have to administer nutrients. When we're taking a look at our own projects, projections, aspirations, like we were talking about last week, is that to examine our motives. What really are our motives? How do we, what is it that we really want to accomplish? Are we trying to make up for something in the past where we misbehaved or messed something up and we want to make things right? Or is it something we just want to do? We're in a similar situation, but we want to do it correctly this time, in line with our conscience. And so those are two different motivations. Maybe the distinction isn't clear because the first instance is when, I screwed up, I have to be a better person. So we say, I want to be a better person, not really knowing what that is. And so what we tend to do is we say, I don't want to be that person. I don't want to mess up. I don't want to mess it up this time. And that's really a shame-based response, an egoic response. When somebody says, boy, I really messed up that time, I'm going to practice again. I got to practice differently, keep a watch on things. And it's a much different attitude towards oneself. In the first instance, it's really defining oneself as being a bad person or a defective person, or there's something wrong with me that I did that, and that sort of thing. In the second instance is, no, I'm basically a good person. I just screwed up. That's all. It's like, in the second instance, it's really somebody's acknowledging that they are a good person. They just need to keep practicing, so to speak. It's like a musician. Every professional musician practices every day, as I've mentioned a number of times. And they're not saying, every time they make a mistake, they go, I'm such an idiot. I can't, this is terrible. I can't believe I'm at this stage and I made that stupid mistake. They don't involve themselves in this sort of negative self-image talk. And they say, okay, got to do that. And they practice, and they practice, and they practice, and they practice until they get it. Then they can play it without any problems. And we're sort of the same way. But our instrument is our psyche and our core values and our behavior. And so we practice. And so one of the things, the exercise we're going to do today is about finding an instance where we were certain things were going to go this way, and they went this way. This is a story I've told on a number of occasions. A very good friend of mine who's a very wealthy guy, a good businessman, and he sold one of his companies, not because he wanted to, but they made him a good deal, for $12 million. And so he and his wife are on their way to pick up the check, and they're on the way, they're going, this is great. That's great. $12 million. That's really, this is really cool. And they get there, and they're in the lawyer's office. A lawyer hands him the check, and he said the instant he took that check in his possession, he fell into an immediate deep depression. And he couldn't figure out why. So fortunately, he got home, talked to his wife, and they had a good enough relationship, talked about it, she felt the same thing. And what it is that they had all this stuff made up in their mind about the value of money. That money itself was going to be X, Y, and Z, and prestige or whatever else they had going on in their minds. But it's really not that at all. Money is just money. Meaning it gives us the ability to do certain things. But other than that, there's no real inherent isness of money. Like we talk about the suchness of flowers in the natural world, the suchness of trees, the suchness of the earth, the suchness of the natural world around us. Money has no suchness whatsoever, none. But people, particularly in today's world, put a lot of value on money that just isn't true. So when they get this money, then they do crazy stuff usually. Now, there's a lot of people with very good character, good conscience and warm heart, that if they have a windfall, they put it together in a very meaningful way. Start a nonprofit foundation, or they make donations to organizations that they support, and things work out just fine. So when they get the money, they don't say, "Oh boy, I've got so much money." They say, "Wow, I've been wanting to help these people for a long time. Now I can do something about it." Very, very different. So we're always on the lookout for our motivations. And the issue underneath that, which is what we talked about recently, this whole thing we talked about recently about motivation last week, is the fact that our thought about the way things are is based on rational deductive thinking and our personal experience. The way things really are is a whole different story. And that's why I love Einstein's quote, because he knew quite well, he knew this quite well. Let's see. He said, "The intuitive mind is a sacred gift, and the rational mind is a faithful servant. We have created a society that honors the servant and has forgotten the gift." And then Hazrat Inayat Khan, who's an amazing, wonderful Sufi teacher, said, "Reason is the illusion of reality," which I like a lot, because I found that to be true. How many times we set about to do something and the whole thing goes in a different direction. And it's I use this principle in counseling all the time. I ask somebody to do a particular practice or an exercise or something like that, and I follow up next week, and I say, "Well, how did it go?" "Oh, well, what I did was," and it's completely different what I asked them to do. And it's just, I said, "Oh, that's really interesting. Tell me more about that." Not like, "You didn't do it right." It's like their own psyche, the natural order of their psyche, took that in and adapted it to the particular needs of their psyche at that time, and it came out this way. And I've noticed that over and over and over again with mindful self-compassion exercises and the mindfulness exercises. But particularly MSC, because the exercises are pretty well prescribed. I mean, they're pretty well laid out. They're clear instructions. But I found so many times people just, they start doing the exercise and it goes in a completely different direction. And the way I see it is all of reality is like that. To know what's really going on is very difficult. There's so much going on underneath, and you talk to the mystics and they talk about all this other stuff that is really important, but we don't really need to know. It's like the operating system. But just know that we don't really know which way things are going to go. And getting used to that is really important. Like, for instance, and back to the specific topic for today, is that we've all had experiences that didn't turn out the way we wanted. And we either wind up depressed or angry or fearful about our own behavior or the other person's behavior, or how we responded to the other person's behavior, or we got this muddle going on. Was it their fault or my fault? And I don't understand why it didn't work that way. And I thought, that sort of thing. So we try to figure out what went wrong, which is entirely the wrong approach. Number one, figuring it out doesn't work. An analysis, an analytical investigation never works. When we begin to ask questions like, what was that about? Without any preconceived notion of what it should be, then we begin to make progress. Because what we're doing, the reason why it didn't turn out the way we thought it would, because we didn't have an accurate view of reality at the time. Not because we're bad or flawed or whatever, we just didn't really understand the reality at the time. And just like when somebody gets a particular exercise to do, and they start doing it, takes off in a different direction, it's because their psyche has to process it in a way that's unique and most useful to their particular needs. And what's going on underneath reality at large on the planet and I assume elsewhere, that reality is something we sometimes are able to align with and sometimes not. Sometimes we give it a good shot and we think it'll go this way or that way, and this is what we want to do, and sometimes it works out and sometimes it doesn't. But we never really know because we only see in part, so to speak. We don't see the whole picture. And this was really the substance of the conversation I referred to earlier with my friend in social justice, is that, she's doing really good work. Her heart is really in the right place. And we talked about all kinds of some other organizations that are really successful. And she's a little puzzled why she can't get anything similar started here in Dallas. Well, then we started talking about the culture in Dallas and how did Texas come to be, and what is the mentality in Texas, and what is their general orientation into life, and what is the power structure that is encapsulating this whole system at different layers. Then it begins to make sense why it's so difficult to have something like restorative justice. That knowing the reality, it gives us a tremendous advantage of being able to say, okay, this is the deal. How do I deal with this? In other words, we lose our naivete. We lose our naivete. We're seeing the situation exactly as it is, and then we decide what we're going to do. And so, well, this is what I'm going to do, even though it may not come to fruition in my lifetime. And that's what we do. And our expectations are in alignment with reality. Knowing, let's say I'm going to start this project, and this is like at least a 3-generation project, and let's see if I can get it into the next generation. And with a legacy, then the legacy of the organization is it should continue to flourish and pass it on to successive generations. That's more in line with the way things work. So we get less unexpected results, and we get more of an education in terms of the reality that we're dealing with. And we begin to understand why someone who is a difficult person we have difficulty with. And the reason for that almost always is that they're pointing out our blind spot. It's not that we just don't like them or they're being unreasonable, which may be true. But if we're upset, they've hit our blind spot. And we're not responding with wisdom and compassion. We're responding with, we get offended, we question our own motivation, question ourselves. And in reality, it's like, okay, blind spot. What did I miss? What is the situation? And almost always we find out that we have a history of not responding well in this particular situation. So it's our pattern that's the problem. So as you can see, when we start looking at things that kind of wanting to, or having the motivation to see things as they are, then we're better equipped to act in a manner consistent with our values and be more effective. And so thank you, Mary. The film I was thinking about, Schindler's List, because Schindler at the end in that last scene, it really showed up what a noble character he was to begin with, but also knowing that he did absolutely everything he could, and his job was done, and that was his job. Now his job may change, because the situation has changed. But he did absolutely everything he could, and more than many people could, for the Jews trapped in Germany during the Second World War. Again, this relates to us in the sense that when we think we messed up or botched something or whatever, or a situation doesn't go the way we want it, it's important to ask ourselves that, did I do everything I could? Yes, because I didn't understand this, this, and this. Oh, okay. So now we have a broader view of things, and we can go back and say, okay, well, next time what I would do is this, this, and this. And so we decrease the unexpected results in our life, so to speak. And I say that instead of saying messes and mess ups and stuff like that. We get unexpected results. And so it shows us our blind spot. We learn, we practice, we fill up that blind spot with understanding, wisdom, compassion, and then we begin to act more wisely in the future. And so I think it's important to know that we, I guess by virtue of the fact that we're human, we really don't see the underlying reality, certainly not to the measure in which it actually exists. The Earth's been around for 8.4 billion years, the scientists say. Well, how do we see the Earth? Well, I see it in terms of the last 100 years. Archaeologists maybe in the last few thousand years. Geologists for maybe the entire 8.4 million years. But everybody has a different view of the Earth, so they have a different relationship with the Earth in that sense. But the reality is, if we're trying to help and we want to do something positive for the planet and for ourselves, we know that we have to work to the extent of our limitations, so to speak. So that's what I think. And so I jabbered on long enough. So it's time to practice, and what we're going to do is an extended mindfulness exercise. First, just settling the mind down as best we can, and then bringing, paying as much attention. How do I say this? As the mind settles down, recognizing and being as attentive as we can to the space between thoughts, that pause, and then we're going to move on to a compassion exercise. And I thought, since given the turmoil that's going on these days, I thought we'd do an exercise on the earth and everybody on the earth, and if you can, include the people who are causing a lot of problems and a lot of pain for others, because they don't have any idea what they're doing. And if we reap just what we sow, it's not going to be pretty for them. So if you can, everybody, we've talked about that a number of times. How do you pray for people who are tyrants and actively involved in harming others? But it's a spiritual illness of the highest order, and they don't have any idea what they're doing to themselves and others, really. And so it's like they're deaf, dumb, and blind, and they're just running on their rational mind, and that's it. It doesn't have anything to do with the earth, doesn't have anything to do with other people. It's entirely just selfish. And so that's a whole nother topic. How do you pray for people who do terrible things? So, but if you can, when we get to the part of the process with the earth, see if you can make that step, and if not, that's okay too, because it's not an easy thing to do. Okay, so we'll get started. So finding a comfortable spot, position, and inviting your whole being into the present moment, and we'll begin. And allowing ourselves to settle into the present moment. And allowing the thoughts of the day float off, if we can, or as soon as we recognize them, letting them go. And settling into the body. Because wherever the mind goes, the body is right here, right now. And allowing ourselves to settle into this interdimensional space of just being. And it may take a while for the mind to settle. But that's okay. Allowing ourselves to let go of the mental and emotional habits which run around our brains. And settling into this space between thoughts. Maybe only a second or two between thoughts at first. That's okay. And just allowing everything to settle as best you can. sort of settling with ease in the here and now, the present moment. And allowing ourselves to continue to settle. And if we notice any tension, mentally, emotionally, or physically, allowing that to drain away if you can. And bringing our awareness fully as we can to this process, particularly to the space between thoughts. Allowing ourselves just to be with this space between thoughts as best we can. As we further ease into it. And savoring the stillness like a smooth stone on the bottom of a lake. And perhaps getting the idea that this space is just open. And is somehow a part of ourselves as well. An aspect of our own being. And recognizing this space is of infinite potential in all directions. And now bringing to mind our lovely planet and all of its beauty and wonder, generosity, wisdom. And knowing she's been around for millions and billions of years. Making our existence possible. And also bringing to mind all the things that we humans have done to the earth with roads and airplanes in the sky and exhaust and factories and wars. And it's part of the turmoil at present. But allowing the compassion and the beauty to surround it all. Compassion for the earth and compassion for the perpetrators as well. They are going to, because the perpetrators will pay the heaviest price. And if we begin to see and respond with our rational mind, seeing if we can pause in that process and move our vision just a little larger to encompass our conceptual framework. Considering the possibility that with everything that has gone on and is going on, perhaps there is a larger dynamic at work that we may or may not know anything about. And accepting it all as it is. And if you care to, asking the simple question, how can I help? And as we do this, feeling a part of whatever this process is that's going on the planet this very moment. And somehow we are part of the solution and the resolution of harms done. And savoring the unusual richness of this idea, this process. us to open our being in the present moment to the whole dynamic. To the whole process. And realizing that somehow, through this process, we have been more compassionate with ourselves as well. And allowing this process, this exercise, in its fullness come to a close. And resting in the afterglow of this process, this exercise. And allowing the body to absorb it as best you can. Letting it sink in and become fully a part of you. So that in a moment when the bell rings again, you can bring this with you as you go about your day and come back to it at any time. Anyone care to share their experience or have a question? Giovanna.
I'll have to really thank you for this meditation because it was the first time that, for me, in my life, I think, that I really understood the concept of Mother Earth. That our Earth holds us. And our Earth and our Mother Earth is very different than our mind and our thoughts, which don't hold us at all.
Mm-hmm.
So, and I have to say that for some reason, recently I picked up, after many, many years, Ovid's Metamorphosis to reread. This is a more modern translation, it's kind of gutsy and energetic. It reminded me of the difference between what are our motivations and what's real, and what do we create, and what is our blind spot. And when you're turning your loved one into a tree, like they do in some of the myths, you can't help to think that it's just a plea for Mother Earth to take hold of us and guide us. And it gave me tremendous compassion for my own mind, that whose motivations start out pure and then get all convoluted by my own constructs. So, thank you.
Thank you, Giovanna. Yes. There are constructs come and say, that's not right. What are you talking about? That's why pausing is so important. Yeah. Anyone else?
Yeah, I can share.
Yeah, Diana.
Yeah, I like this part of noticing the space between thoughts. That brought some clarity. Yeah, I also felt fear here in my chest, a lot of hysteria. Something that I witnessed about a day ago came to my mind that brought a lot of hysteria. Maybe something to do with cultural fear. Like in my neighbor's building, I heard middle of the night, like 2 o'clock, a lot of sound. And somebody almost yelling, crying. That I went to the window and I can hear that sound a lot. And I saw 4 people just catching a boy. He might be like 15, 16 years, was yelling and all that. I don't know what they were doing, some rituals, or I know India's like there's stories of spirit possession and all. Then I had my kids also get up and they asked me what's happening. I said, nothing, go back to sleep. And that went on for almost like 3 hours. And if my cultural stories caught up with me, it's like, okay, what that could be, what if that could happen to my kids? What, yeah. And then I could notice that come up in my chest very strongly. And I sat with it. I had some images also come up. Yeah, staying with that really helped to contain it, seed for what it is. That was helpful.
So if I heard you correctly, you're taking the event at face value. In other words, without projecting or making assumptions or trying to fix it or run away from it or anything like that. You just accepted it kind of as it was, whatever it was. Is that fair?
Yeah, that's there. I mean, one part was definitely seeing it objectively. There's something in the mind, maybe more cultural. It's like, oh, what if it's really a spirit possession? It was just the next building. Yeah, there's some fear in that.
He's going to come knocking on your door.
We've been
Halloween.
hearing those stories.
Well, it was just Halloween here a few days ago.
Yeah.
Oh gosh.
Yeah, I was just saying how those stories are so embedded, right? They're so inside, and then when something comes, they just come out.
Yeah.
It feels so real. The sensations are like, it's like, I feel almost like something's running in the body.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that gets
Good to
to.
laugh.
I'm sorry. Go ahead.
It's good to laugh at it.
Yes. Yes. The human mind and psychology and life is so much bigger than what we could imagine.
Yeah, that means the mind that I have is not mine. It's part of it belongs to the culture and society here.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah.
It has all those stories.
And so coming to a place where you could just accept it as it is without having to interpret it any way, how did that feel?
Yeah, that feels very rational, very objective, without any inferences. I just see things for what they are. I mean, I have no evidence to they believe in the stories. They just happen like that.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, looking at very objectively, like, yeah, clear seeing. Yeah, from that angle, there's no fear. It's like, okay, something happened. Yeah, that's about it. I have no details. What was that? Because I didn't go and inquire middle of the night. I was afraid.
Well, and that's natural to be afraid, right? Because that was outside of your conceptual framework. Your conceptual framework is going, what is that? Yeah. Yeah, and that's really good, because when we don't impute it with something with any meaning at all, we don't assign any meaning or judgment or valuation to it at all. It's just, and we can at the end say, I don't know, but accept it as it is. That's where we really begin to learn more, because what we're really doing is relaxing our conceptual framework and said maybe we can understand this at some point.
Yeah. Yeah, interestingly. Yeah, I went again on the balcony to just see if everything is all right. But I know that these are all superstitions, still cultural stories running, and yeah, now when I look at it objectively, it makes sense. Both for feeling the fear and yeah, just seeing for what it is.
Right. Right. And the fear is from your conceptual framework, and just accepting it as it is from the pause. And so it's a mystery. Who knows?
Yeah.
Maybe we'll know about it. There's an old gospel song. I don't know all the words and stuff, but I think about it once in a while, and it goes. The line that I like is, "Further along, we'll know all about it." and I like that, because what it says is, yeah, a lot of stuff happens we don't understand, but we keep going in the right direction as best we can. At some point, we'll know a lot more about whatever it is that's going on. I find that to be true.
Yeah, that brings some shift. Now I can see the incident for what it is. I'm also able to see the conceptual framework. And earlier I was operating out of it, but now I can see it from the outside. Yeah.
Right.
It brings a lot of clarity.
You know, there's a book, I think I've mentioned it once before, if it was, a long time ago, that called Spiritual Healing. This I have mentioned. It's been months, but it was written by Louis Mail Madron, and he's written a lot of books. He's Native American, and at the time he was getting his training at Stanford in psychiatry. He was working with his Native American elders in a similar manner. And he was able to synthesize all that. And he has a remarkable perspective, on psychology and psychiatry, and he basically has the same, what I was talking about earlier at the beginning. He says, we don't really know what's going on inside somebody, but something's at work. So we have to be open enough to allow that to happen and to work, and sort of guide it into transition, into fruition. And there's some wonderful stories in that book. So.
What's the name you said?
Spiritual Healing. And he's got a website. Here, I'll put his name in the chat.
Yeah.
Yeah, you type that in, you get his website, and Amazon's got all of his books.
Thank you. That was very helpful.
Good. I'm glad. Yeah, because typically, without any of this sort of things that we do, the mindfulness and compassion, when we run into something that's really outside our framework, we tend to simply be afraid of it. And that's it. And that doesn't do us any good. We don't get the message, we don't get to change, we don't get to broaden our perspectives. Because when our conceptual framework is challenged, we take it as a threat, and we start defending ourselves. But when we go, oh, that's weird, and just accept it as it is, and we may or may not know anything, we may or may not know what's really going on. But it gives us an opportunity to, if we can accept it somehow and understand it somehow, change our framework, change our conceptual framework. It is. Well, the chat said, yeah, that's awful. Yeah. I was playing around before we started. There's just one or two people on. Even before anybody came on, I was talking, and I was watching the chat, and it didn't get anything right. All this other stuff. So I'm going to save that just because it's so funny. But yeah, that's the challenge, enlarging our conceptual framework.
Alfie?
Yeah. Rita.
So earlier on, before the meditation, you were talking about, the people who do things that harm others and offering them compassion. So the way you were talking about it, I think one thing you said was they don't know what they're doing. And you said, if I heard you well, that it'll be harder for them, it'll be worse for them. I can't remember quite what that would be used. He said that with such confidence. Anyway, I was curious, where does that come from? Given that we don't know anything, that's the whole thing is about being open, and we don't actually know, from a rational point of view. That doesn't. Yeah. So yeah, that was kind of unexpected. Not only that you said that, but the confidence that I heard you in your voice. So yeah, can you say a bit more about where are you coming from?
Sure.
Saying that.
Yeah, I mean, the concept is in all of the major world religions and all the contemplative traditions that we reap just what we sow. There's karma. There's always a consequence. One of the things that, to sort of expound on the general topic, is that when we're trying to make a decision, what we're really trying to do is to assess the relationship between cause and effect. I want this outcome. What do I have to do to get that outcome? Or if I do this, what's going to happen? So this cause and effect thing is central to our human existence, day to day, in every way. It's like a theory, like a scientist working on a really difficult science problem and say, well, I don't know about this, but let me try this and see if it works. And they try something and they go, oh, that's really interesting. And it begins to take the whole project in a different direction. I don't understand that, but it seems to work. There's been a lot of stuff in math and science was like that. So I don't get it, but it seems to be working, and I don't know why. It's like back in, what was that, the 80s, I took a class in physics. And the teacher he taught the honors physics, so this is a really smart guy. And we were talking we kind of hit it off, so after one of the classes we were talking, and he said, and on this very topic, and he said, well, in physics, 11 dimensions have been verified mathematically. That we're living in an 11-dimension reality, but we only see one. And he said, that's what the math proves. And then he said, I don't know if I buy that. So that sounds pretty wild to me. I don't know if And so, we kind of try it out and we look. And is there anything that's ever happened that there wasn't a consequence from? Really, no. I mean, when we ask a sort of general, basic question, and how often we've done something that we thought would be beneficial and it backfired on us completely. Or we do something small and it has a great beneficial effect to somebody. And so the topic of cause and effect is really a central part of what the topic is for today, because we get to think about whatever I'm going to do, it has some kind of consequence. There's a fellow if anybody's ever interested in the spirituality of Alcoholics Anonymous, there is a speaker by the name of Sandy B. B as in boy, B as in beach. Actually, his name is Sandy Beach. That's his real name. But anyway, he kind of made it his message to further develop and understand the spirituality of Alcoholics Anonymous. And he has some wonderful things to say that don't just apply to recovery, they apply to spiritual life in general. Well, one of the things he said that I thought was very interesting, he said his life has gotten really simple over the years. He said there's no real problems anymore. And so a difficulty comes up, he works with it, gets resolved. But he said when that's going on, he's not really making an effort in any particular direction. He said things happen. And they just happen. If we look back, we can see that happening in our lives. We're going in a particular direction, and then something will happen and takes our life in a different direction. So there is a cause and effect in process the whole time. But most of the time we don't pay any attention to it. We just kind of do stuff or don't do stuff. But if we step back and take a look, how much of our life has been the result of some positive or negative, and I don't like those valuations, but some sort of behavior in the past has brought about a condition in the present. If we sort of meditate on it and kind of follow the rabbit trail and go backwards, we go, oh, that's where that came from. And we begin to see this cause and effect thing. But so if that's true for us, it's just as true for Putin and Netanyahu. I mean, it's the same for everybody. So, what are the effects of, Netanyahu's strategies for Gaza. Horrendous suffering. What about Putin taking 2,000 Ukrainian kids, stealing them from their families and raising them in Russia? I mean, it's just unconscionable. What's going to happen to somebody like that when they're doing those kinds of terrible things? I don't know, but it ain't good. And so that's the way, because I've had, as I've talked before, I've had a very difficult time for a long period of time having any kind of non-resentful, vengeful ideas about some of these tyrants. Because my gut reaction, my immediate reaction is something negative toward them. They're bad, they're terrible, they need to be stopped, this is awful, that sort of thing. And realizing I don't have any control over his behavior. None. I do know, I believe, because the only thing that seems to make sense to me, sort of like that little mathematical formula that we don't understand. We plug in, we reap just what we sow, and things begin to make sense. If that's true for me, it's true for him. And it's true for all the people who are doing terrible things to themselves or other people. They just don't know what they're doing. Now, another wrinkle in this is the people that I've worked with alcoholism and recovery, and their lives before they get sober are terrible. They're being miserable, terrible human beings to themselves and to other people. Causing, alcoholics have caused all kinds of problems in families and communities, with kids and spouses and employers, messing everything up for thousands of years. But what has brought, when somebody's done that, it can bring them to a point of surrender. And if they do that, and they get sober, and they work a program, they work the 12 steps, they have a really amazing life. So much wisdom and so much experience that they can carry with them and help other people. And then there's people, like in an intervention, in the family saying, well, we love you, but your behavior is driving us nuts. We don't want to put up with that anymore. So you can either go to treatment, here are the tickets, or we're going to lock the doors, you won't see your kids again, I'm filing for divorce, and your boss is going to fire you. Sometimes the alcoholic will say, okay, I'll go. And sometimes they say, can I think about it? Is there any other deal? Is there any other option here? Because they don't want to stop drinking. And I just find that a phenomenon, because the terrible things that alcoholics do before getting sober is like really messing up the world, hurting people, hurting themselves in unbelievably tragic ways. But if it brings them to the point of surrender, they're amazing people. Maybe it's the same for Netanyahu and Putin and Bolsonaro and Duterte and Bashir Assad. I mean, the world is full of these people who just love power and control, and they're just causing misery for millions of people. Maybe it's the same for them. If it is, they continue this behavior, may it bring them to the point where they can surrender. Because they're running entirely on ego. They're spiritually sick in that sense. And so I really think if the whole world, let's say, we at least got 1% of the population to radiate compassion, pure compassion, to our favorite dictators, it would really have some positive effect. They wouldn't know what's going on. Yeah, I mean, they can't register compassion they don't register anyone else's suffering. But maybe compassion can help them do that, whatever it is. So that's the spirit in which I said that, because I felt this really strong inward drive. I have to rid myself of blame and a sense of resentment and revenge on people like Putin and Bolsonaro and Bashir Assad. They've done horrible things to people. I mean, it's just so uncaring and creating so much suffering without the slightest bit of compunction. It's bizarre. But, I personally think nobody's beyond the reach of compassion. Sometimes it takes longer for some people than others. But I need peace of mind. That's the most important thing, because I don't want this resentment or anger at them I don't want that, because I'm disturbed now. And I'm more like them, wreaking revenge, wanting to wreak revenge on them. But that's not to say if I had the option, I would put them behind bars without a second's hesitation. But I wouldn't recommend the death penalty. You know what I mean? And I do whatever I can to see if there's any way of rehabilitating this person to have a conscience. What happened to their conscience? Well, they just didn't get one, I guess, when they were born. But to see if that's possible. So those are my thoughts, and that's a really good question. I'm glad you asked that question, because I don't really I don't really know about karma, and we reap just what we sow and that sort of thing. I take everything as an experiment, and so that concept sounds pretty good to me, so I subject it to kind of experimenting. Does it really work in this situation? Does it work in that situation? What about with these terrible so-called leaders that don't really seem to care about human suffering? Maybe it'll work with them too. It certainly worked with Hitler. Because what Hitler's fate was? He married his girlfriend like an hour before he died. They've been together. Hedda Gabler, I think her name was. Anyway, and then he committed suicide, and she committed suicide along with him. And he killed himself twice. He took a cyanide cap and shot himself in the head. Now, that's a small price to pay for killing 200 million people. But it did not end well for him. So him creating that kind of suffering for other people, what a miserable, terrible way to die. So it seems to apply. So I assume that's addressed your question.
Well, I think the piece about what do you need and the irony or the hypocrisy, if I want to be a bit more challenging about getting into vengeance, for me that's really important to consider, however hard it is, to remember that just makes me the same as that I'm not being integral to my values. When the going gets rough and I'm collapsing into the mainstream system of punishment, so it was good to and I think it's always good. I try and do that myself. It's always include myself in it. What's going on for me, not just generalize out there. It's like, what is it? Because obviously what I need is feeling how I'm responding to something.
Mm-hmm.
Often that gets hidden in people's opinions about stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So that was really helpful, and I think we all, everybody is affecting each other, because we're interdependent.
Right.
The difficulty comes, I think, when some of these leaders are the order of magnitude of suffering. And really, the way I see it, somebody taking their life is really no recompense. It just can't be. I mean, okay, with his life, so what?
Yeah.
But I think that's a red herring for me. I think where I'm at is that, and this is the hard thing for me, really hard, is that there is suffering in the world. And I've been lucky. I've had a lot of really bad things happen, but I'm not in one of those countries or with one of those places with those histories. And I'm not subject, because of where I am, to hopefully coming across that and having that me be one of those people who are affected. But that's what happens, because that's what people do when they are hurt. I don't think they were born without a conscience. Things happen to them. And they had to armor, and they created a set of values and a need to control. And it's tragic. So it's how do I hold tragedy? It's difficult, because obviously, some countries, including your own, will go out and try and kill them, like Bin Laden, right?
Right.
And that's an interesting thing about when one should do that or not, because usually they're politically motivated killings anyway. They're not around morality; they're around political ideologies and about control of resources. So that but I'm not a politician. I'm not getting to that. But what I'm saying is that there is a lot of suffering that we may not be able to do anything about. I can't do anything about, and I don't believe that when that order of magnitude of suffering, there's nothing really that could do it for me to make it okay. But that's how it is, and how can I hold that? And maybe one day I'll be one of those people suffering, and I just have a lot of thankfulness for myself that God, I'm not living in some of those areas, including natural disasters, by the way, that
Sure.
pretty safe. And the other thing that's very hard for me to hold is that, they say the only reason there are evil people in the world, and I do say that with some hesitation using those kinds of words, but this is like a quote I read, because not enough good people stand up to it, like me, if you like. So, I want to name that, I do my little bits here and there locally, what I can. I used to go on marches, and I used to do things. I'm not sure how much that really helps, but I found my own way of doing something. But this idea that, especially the ones who were elected by millions of people, including in your own country. And the sadness I hold is I do believe in an evolutionary approach to mammals and human beings as mammals, that we are co-regulating herd mammals, and we are wired for altruism and compassion. We're interdependent. So from that point of view, and also from a spiritual point of view, that we are part of our system, all connected. And when there's a lot of hurt, I mean, the more horrendous things people do, including the alcohol, when we need something to soothe ourselves, and the more extreme the addiction, all it means is this, it's right there in front of us. If you can read, it's an open book. Extreme harm happened to that person. And, because of the fear, we talked about fear earlier on. When people are fearful, they will lock down the hatches, and they will go more right wing, and they will do anything to protect themselves at the expense of harming other people. So that's the sadness I'm holding. It's endemic. It's not just these particular leaders.
Right.
It's society is so seriously hurt. And that's my challenge to myself, is how can I find some peace, maybe the peace will come from an alignment from my values, because they've got a different value system, or they've got different strategies for the same, we've got the same needs around protection, dignity, all of that, but they're using different strategies. How can I hold that with compassion? How can I, and knowing that mostly nothing really happens to them. Many of them disappear, right? They find ways of disappearing when it comes to the crunch. And many of them get away scot-free because nothing is proved, and nobody, the good people don't want to kill them, like you just said. You wouldn't. Nothing actually mainly happens to people like that. And that's the way it is. And it's not for me to understand, It's not, I'm not God. I mean, I don't understand the workings of the universe, and it's that's a big challenge for me. It's a big challenge to stay, if I believe in compassion and kindness and my understanding of why, cause and effect. If you mistreat people, they will lose themselves and they will not be human anymore. I mean, absolutely, cause and effect. Of course, some people are going to do this. Of course they are. Of course people are going to vote for them when you see what their lives are like, what they're being fed, rhetoric. So I mean, it's like, that's the sadness,
Well,
but how not to collapse in it, how do I hold it but not collapse? Because I don't know, it was Thich Nhat Hanh or the Dalai Lama said, when things are really, really bad, tough, the last thing we want, I have many friends who basically collapse, ostrich head in the sand, or like they just like, oh my God, they're kind of collapsed. And they was one of them. I was just saying, when things get tough, the last thing the world needs is people who collapsed. That's not the exact words. Put in calm and liveliness, who can be responsive, who can do the compassionate practices, like you said, who can maybe be part of the 1% who do the worldwide compassion,
Yeah.
And so I need to make sure that I'm staying integral to that. But it's hard.
No, that's exactly right. And, this is a theme we'll be touching on throughout, because it's the essence of how are we going to practice? How do we practice? And if we practice and we're harboring revenge, that's kind of an impediment. So this is a really important topic, and thank you for sharing all that.
I'm working restorative justice, by the way.
Oh, really? Oh, good. Yeah, it's that's a whole other topic.
It's really linked to this. It's foundation.
Absolutely. But
not many people talk about, so like when you mentioned it about the person, So thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you, Rita. Okay, folks.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you all. Really appreciate you all. Take care. Hope you have a great week.
Thank you.
All right. Bye now. Bye.